What happens when someone reads their dying mother's final words on live television? And even Dr. Phil, after 25 years and thousands of stories, cannot speak. The letter trembled in Sarah Mitchell's hands. Her voice cracked on the third word. Dr. Phil, standing center stage, went completely still. His hand moved slowly to cover his mouth. The studio audience, 428 people who had laughed and gasped through dozens of episodes, sat in absolute silence. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. What no one in that room knew was that this letter would change everything about how we understand grief, forgiveness, and a mother's final gift. 6 months earlier, Sarah had submitted her story to the Dr. Phil show through the standard online form. She'd written 3 sentences. My mother died believing I hated her. I found her last letter 2 years after her death. I need help forgiving myself. The producers had seen thousands of submissions. But something about those 3 sentences made senior producer Linda Reynolds stop scrolling. She'd been with the show for 18 years. She knew which stories Dr. Phil needed to tell. This one's different, Linda told the production meeting. This isn't about drama. It's about something deeper. Dr. Phil approved the booking within 24 hours. He didn't know the details yet. He didn't know about the letter. He just knew that sometimes, a story chooses you. But when Sarah walked into the studio that morning, she was carrying more than just emotional baggage. The taping was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Standard format, pre-interview with producers, makeup, mic check, audience warm-up, then recording. Sarah went through the motions mechanically. She'd barely slept in 3 days. In her purse was an envelope. Cream-colored, aged, with her name written in her mother's handwriting. She'd carried it every day for 2 years but hadn't opened it in 18 months. The first time she read it, she couldn't finish. The second time, she sobbed for 6 hours straight. After that, she sealed it and tried to forget it existed. But grief doesn't forget. The show began normally. Dr. Phil walked out to applause. He introduced Sarah. She sat in the guest chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. The envelope stayed in her purse backstage. Sarah, thank you for being here, Dr. Phil said, settling into his chair. Tell me about your mother. Sarah's voice was steady at first. Her name was Margaret. She was a teacher. She died of cancer 3 years ago. We hadn't spoken in 2 years when she died. Dr. Phil leaned forward. This was familiar territory for him, estranged relationships, family rifts, unresolved grief. But his instinct told him there was something more. What happened between you two? Sarah's answer would set everything in motion. I blamed her for my father leaving, Sarah said, and suddenly the words were pouring out. When I was 16, my dad walked out. Just left. And my mom, she didn't fight for him. She didn't cry. She just let him go. I was so angry. I said things, terrible things. I told her I'd never forgive her for not fighting for our family. The audience was quiet. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. And you carried that anger for how long? Until she was diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said maybe 6 months. Sarah's voice cracked. And I thought, good. She deserves to suffer like she made me suffer. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This was raw. This was real. But she didn't suffer alone, did she? Dr. Phil's voice was gentle now, the voice he reserved for the moments that mattered most. No. She called me every week. Left voicemails. Honey, I love you. Please call me back. I just want to hear your voice. And I deleted every single one. Dr. Phil stopped. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He just waited. Because he knew the worst was coming. She died on a Tuesday. I got the call from hospice. They said she'd been asking for me until the very end. Her last words were my name. Sarah was crying now, but she kept going. I didn't go to the funeral. I told myself she didn't deserve my grief. The studio was absolutely silent. Even the camera operators had stopped adjusting their angles. 2 weeks after the funeral, my aunt brought me a box of my mom's things. I almost threw it away. But something made me open it. Sarah reached into her purse. Her hands were shaking. And I found this. She pulled out the envelope. Dr. Phil saw it, and something in his expression changed. He'd seen thousands of letters, photos, mementos on his show. But this one, he could feel its weight from across the stage. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "It's dated 3 days before she died." She could barely hold a pen at that point. But she wrote it anyway. "Sarah," Dr. Phil said, and his voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "Have you read it recently?" "Not in 18 months. I can't. Every time I try." She couldn't finish. Dr. Phil stood up. He walked over to her chair and knelt beside it, something he almost never did on camera. The producers in the control room tensed. This wasn't in the show format. This wasn't how episodes usually went. "I think," Dr. Phil said slowly, "that you need to read it now. Here. With all of us." Sarah shook her head violently. I can't do it." "You can," Dr. Phil said firmly. "And you need to. Not for the show. Not for the audience. For you. And for her." The audience waited. The cameras kept rolling. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten in increasingly shaky script. Sarah unfolded it carefully, like it might disintegrate if she moved too quickly. "Dear Sarah," she began, and immediately her voice broke. Dr. Phil placed his hand on her shoulder. "Take your time," he said. "We're not going anywhere." Sarah nodded and started again. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know you, and sweetheart, I know you better than anyone, you're blaming yourself for not being there. Don't." The audience was crying now. Openly. Audibly. Sarah continued, her voice shaking. "You asked me once why I didn't fight for your father. I never answered because I didn't want you to carry what I carried. But you deserve the truth now." This was the moment. Dr. Phil felt it. Everyone felt it. "Your father didn't leave us, honey. I asked him to go. Because I found out he was hurting you." The studio went dead silent. Sarah stopped reading. She looked up at Dr. Phil, her face frozen in shock. "What?" she whispered. Dr. Phil's expression was unreadable, but his eyes said everything. "Keep reading, Sarah." She looked back at the letter, her hands now shaking violently. "I found out he was coming into your room at night. You were 14. You don't remember because you've blocked it out. But I remember. When you started having nightmares, when you stopped eating, when you flinched every time he touched you. I knew." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Sarah couldn't continue. She was sobbing too hard. Dr. Phil gently took the letter from her hands. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. Dr. Phil stood, holding the letter, and for a moment he just looked at it. Then he looked at the cameras, directly at America watching at home. "What I'm about to read," he said quietly, "is between a mother and daughter. But I think Sarah wants you to hear it. Because shame dies when stories are told in safe places." He read, "I couldn't tell you. I couldn't shatter your image of your father. And I thought that if I made him leave quietly, you'd never have to know. You'd be angry at me instead of destroyed by the truth. I chose your anger over your trauma. I would make that choice again 1,000 times." The audience was weeping. Producers in the control room were crying. The camera operators had tears running down their faces. Dr. Phil continued, "I let you hate me because hate is easier to carry than violation. I let you blame me because blame is cleaner than abuse. And when you stopped calling, when you shut me out, I understood. Because I knew the day would come when you'd find this letter. When you'd understand. And when that day came, I needed you to know I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. Not even when you said you wished I was dead. Not even when you didn't come to say goodbye." Dr. Phil stopped. His hand was covering his mouth. He was frozen. For 25 years, he'd been the man with all the answers, the person who could fix anything, explain everything, make sense of chaos. But this was beyond analysis. This was sacred. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Finally, Dr. Phil looked at Sarah. "Your mother," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion, "loved you more than her own life. More than her own reputation. More than her own need to be loved by you. She took your anger, your hatred, your rejection, and she held it all so you wouldn't have to hold the truth." Sarah was shaking uncontrollably. Dr. Phil set the letter down carefully and knelt beside her again. "Sarah, listen to me. You didn't fail her. You couldn't have known. She made sure you wouldn't know. That was her gift to you. But I told her I hated her." Sarah sobbed. "The last time we spoke, I told her I wished she was dead. And she forgave you before the words even left your mouth," Dr. Phil said firmly. "That's what this letter is. It's not a goodbye. It's a release. She's releasing you from the guilt. The question is, are you ready to accept that release?" What happened next shocked everyone in the studio, including Dr. Phil himself. Sarah stood up suddenly. She walked to center stage, holding the letter against her chest. She turned to face the audience. "My mother's name was Margaret Ann Mitchell," she said loudly, clearly. "And she was the bravest person I've ever known." The audience erupted into applause. Standing ovation. 428 people on their feet, crying and clapping and witnessing something they'd never forget. Dr. Phil stood beside her, and for once, he let someone else have the final word. "If you're watching this," Sarah said to the cameras, "and you're carrying anger at someone who's gone, please look deeper. Because sometimes the people we hate the most are the ones who loved us enough to become our villains." Dr. Phil turned to the camera. He rarely did this. But this moment demanded it. "I've been doing this show for 25 years, he said quietly. "I've heard thousands of stories. But this one," he stopped, collected himself. "This one reminds me why I do this work. Because healing isn't always pretty. It's not always comfortable. But it's always worth it." He looked at Sarah. "Your mother left you a gift. Not just this letter. She left you truth. She left you freedom. What you do with that gift is up to you." Sarah nodded, tears still streaming. "I know what I'm doing with it." "Tell me," Dr. Phil said. "I'm forgiving myself. Because she already forgave me." The audience applauded again. Dr. Phil pulled Sarah into a hug, something he rarely did on camera. The producers knew this segment was running long. They didn't care. Some moments transcended television. After the show wrapped, Dr. Phil did something he'd only done a handful of times in his career. He stopped the cameras entirely. He asked the audience to remain seated. He brought Sarah's Aunt Linda onto the stage, the woman who'd brought her the box of her mother's things. "Linda," Dr. Phil said, "I want to ask you something off camera. Off record. Did Margaret ever tell you what she did? Why she made her husband leave?" Linda nodded, crying. "She told me the day she asked him to go. She made me promise never to tell Sarah. She said, 'My daughter needs a villain? Let it be me. At least she'll survive.'" Dr. Phil closed his eyes. When he opened them, he turned to his producers. "I want to start a fund," he said. "For survivors of childhood abuse who don't remember. For the parents who carry impossible secrets. For the people who become villains so their children can be heroes. That fund, the Margaret Mitchell Memorial Foundation, now provides free therapy to thousands of families. But that's not what made this story legendary. What made it legendary was what happened 3 days after the episode aired. Dr. Phil's office received 47,000 letters, emails, messages, all from people saying the same thing. "I had a letter like that. I had a parent like that. I had a truth I didn't understand." The episode went viral. 89 million views in the first week. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was scandalous. But because it was true. Raw. Real. And because it reminded us of something we forget too easily. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the ones saving us from worse pain. Dr. Phil kept Sarah's mother's letter in his office. Framed. On the wall behind his desk. Every time he felt tired, every time he wondered if this work mattered, he looked at that letter. Because that letter proved what he'd always believed: healing is possible. Truth is powerful. And love, real love, doesn't always look the way we think it should. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Sarah later became an advocate for abuse survivors. She speaks at conferences, writes articles, works with therapists who specialize in repressed trauma. And every time she tells her story, she starts the same way. My name is Sarah Mitchell. And my mother saved my life by letting me hate her. Dr. Phil still brings her back to the show sometimes. Not as a guest. As a reminder that the work they do there, helping people find truth, find healing, find peace, isn't just television. It's transformation. The letter remains in his office. A testament to a mother's impossible choice. And a reminder that sometimes, the deepest love looks like the cruelest rejection. Margaret and Mitchell died alone in a hospice room, her daughter's name on her lips. But she didn't die in vain. Because her final words, written on cream-colored paper with a trembling hand, became the bridge her daughter needed to find her way back to herself. And that, Dr. Phil knows, is the only kind of legacy that truly matters.